I want to start on the issue of jobs. Estimates that a no-deal Brexit could result in 40,000 job losses could prove to be conservative, according to Minister Paschal Donohoe. It is an absolute priority that jobs are protected. How can this best be done? What is the best model, if you like, for protecting jobs? Let's start by looking at what the bill provides for. Amongst other things, this bill provides for the following. Number one, Enterprise Ireland to lend up to €7.5 million to a company without having to consult the government, and more than that if it has the government's permission. Enterprise Ireland to invest up to €7.5 million in a company without having to consult the government, and more than that with the government's permission. An array of increased grants to companies for research, grant aid to the horticulture industry over and above their eligibility for Department of Agriculture grants. In other words, a kind of bailout model which would see the state providing aid to the private sector. A number of questions arise. Will the companies have to open their books for inspection before receiving aid? Will it be a condition of state aid that a company guarantees that there be no job losses, that a company does not cut wages, that a company complies with environmental standards, that a company receiving state aid recognises trade unions? Will a company, in other words, be allowed to receive state aid and then cut jobs or cut wages? Count Corla, I am totally in favour of saving jobs. I am in favour of state aid to save jobs, but I'm also in favour of doing it on a different basis. I believe that medium or large-size enterprises that need state aid in this crisis should be taken into state ownership. In other words, should be nationalised. Of course, when the banks were nationalised 10 years ago, they did not serve the people. They shut branches, axed jobs and hammered mortgage holders. Their boards were stuffed with establishment figures. There should be no establishment figures this time. Nationalisation in this crisis should be done on the basis of workers' control and workers' management. These nationalisations should guarantee job protection, protection of wage rates, the highest environmental standards and trade union rights. Count Corla, retailers from the Republic, from Northern Ireland and from Britain joined forces last week to warn that the price of everyday food items could jump by up to 45% in the event of a no-deal Brexit. The Director of Retail Ireland, Mr Thomas Burke, said, regardless of the type of Brexit agreed over the coming weeks, retailers will see an increase in their operating costs arising from checks at ports and other supply chain disruptions. In the current operating environment, these additional costs simply cannot be absorbed and will have to be passed on to the consumers in the form of higher prices. Retail Ireland represents the interests of the big chains. I do not believe that the big chains simply cannot absorb increased costs. To take just one example, pre-tax profits soared by almost 800% to just under £1.3 billion sterling at Tesco in the period February 2017 to February 2018. I can state with a degree of certainty, I think, that Tesco can absorb increased costs better than a household on the average industrial wage, or a household on not much more than the minimum wage, for that matter. I would say to the Tescos of this world that if you try to increase prices by anything remotely resembling the kind of figures mentioned last week, you will need to prepare for protest outside of the shops. I'll be there myself, along with many others, I suspect. And if you want to take that as a warning, fine. That's exactly what it is. Furthermore, the trade union movement should take action to ensure that wages are not undermined by price increases. Either wages should be linked to prices, or the state should act to freeze prices. The unions need to put this government under real pressure on this issue. Which brings me to my final point. We know the red lines laid down by the Tory government. We know the red lines laid down by nationalism and by unionism. It is time for the Labour movement to lay down its red lines. The Irish Congress of Trade Unions needs to convene a conference as a matter of urgency to bring together every working class activist on the island of Ireland to discuss these matters alongside workers' representatives from England, Scotland and Wales. Delegates from trade unions, representatives from workplaces, genuine cross-community groups, all should be invited. No to job losses and price increases. No to wage cuts. No to sectarian division. Yes to nationalisation to save jobs. Yes to action against price increases. Yes to the unity of working class people in fighting to defend our jobs, our conditions and our futures. These are the red lines the working class movement needs to discuss and to act on.